All right, guys. Episode 17 of the Gurupresario Podcast. I am here with my new friend, Jim Moore of GQ Magazine. We're filming from Palm Springs, California. Yeah, right, Jim? Yeah, right, correct,
Right.
Jim?
That's right. Thanks for having me. I'm in Cali, and it's heating up. It's starting to get hot. It's those desert summers kind of creeping in, but
I bet it is.
love it.
I know originally when we spoke, I had sent you a message on Instagram, and the original plan was to actually shoot a podcast in Brooklyn, where you're currently stationed at. However, pandemic hit, turned things upside down, and now you're in Palm Springs. I'm in Texas. I haven't been back to New York in probably a good year and a half. But yeah.
So excited to get back. I mean, I'm really thankful to have this house for many decades, and it was a vacation home for me, but just been hunkered down here for a year, and now itching to get back. Probably next month we'll head back to Brooklyn, and excited about it. And you should come too.
Oh, I will. I'll be there. I just spoke with a good friend of mine, Faraz. We had him on the podcast last week. We'll be up there. I'll be up there sometime in the next 2 months. We'll definitely have to do lunch somewhere.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
As I do with every guest, Jim, I want to give you a brief moment to just introduce yourself, where you're from, and kind of where you're at now.
Okay. So my name is Jim Moore. I'm the GQ creative director at large, and I am a creative director, independent creative director at this point in my career, and can't wait to tell you all the stories and all the things that have been going on. But I'm originally from St. Paul, Minnesota. So, I don't know if you know anything about the Twin Cities, but, everybody, whether they're from St. Paul or whether they're from anywhere else that's not Minneapolis, they say they're from Minneapolis because St. Paul is like the podunk town. St. Paul is like on the other side of the river. That's what other people say. I say St. Paul is great because that's where I'm from. And there's so many charming things about it, but it is about half the size of Minneapolis. So you have these two cities that are just separated by the Mississippi River. And being a young kid, I always wanted to go to Minneapolis because Minneapolis felt like the really big city, skyscrapers and more concrete and more kind of ways to fantasize that maybe I was in New York City. But yeah, that's where I'm from, and I crawled my way to New York City when I was a young kid.
What initially attracted you to New York City?
The fact that I could not follow my dreams in where I was living at the point. And my mom was incredible. She was very instrumental, and she said it kind of broke her heart to do this, but she said, you got to get out of here. Your dreams and aspirations are much bigger than this little town. So, she slipped me the money for a plane ticket, and I took off for New York and found myself a little school that would teach me about fashion, because I knew nothing about it. And I knew I didn't want to be a fashion designer, and I knew I didn't want to work in retail. But I did know, because I was in art school for a while after high school, that I wanted to do something in fashion. I had a voracious appetite for periodicals, specifically fashion magazines. My mom and dad loved magazines. They had tons of subscriptions. And, my dad was more kind of the Time Life guy, and my mom was more the Better Homes and Garden, McCall's kind of lady, right? So, and then I was there with the sophisticated magazines like GQ and Vogue, and I'd go into my room and just kind of get lost in them. And that unknowingly that would lead me to New York and a career in magazines. And I was always enchanted by the pictures, and they always gave me goosebumps, and I always got excited about what I saw, and I always open, and I still to this day open a magazine very gingerly, and I have to go from front to back, page by page, and really kind of swallow it up and see what I can take from it. But I think it was really the day I started my schooling in New York and figuring out what school was best for me. Like, I didn't want to go to FIT because that was more of a design school. So I found this little tiny school, which was called Toby Coburn School for Fashion Careers. And it was
In
on
the
the Upper
city?
East Side. What's that?
And I was going to ask, it was in the city? You said Upper East Side.
It was in the city, and I say the name to people, and they kind of chuckle. But in those days, it was a very small school. It was above the old Tom Ford boutique on Madison Avenue, above the Prada store on Madison Avenue. It was the second floor. Less than 100 kids, and I did my research, and there's no internet in those days. This is 1977. Okay, really dating myself. So I'm in New York. It's 1977. It's the Son of Sam is still loose. The blackout happens. Studio 54 opens. It's a pretty epic time to be in New York.
You write about this in your book, right? I mean,
I write about it. Yeah. I write about it. And so I head to this school that I found in the back of Mademoiselle magazine, because no internet means, how do you do research on what school to go to in New York City if you don't want to be a fashion designer, but you want to be in fashion and learn about it? I knew nothing about fashion, except I knew that I liked to dress up.
Right.
And so I looked at these little articles, and it was like, luckily Mademoiselle had done a feature kind of connected into an advertising situation where they were breaking down the fashion schools in New York and saying, if you want to do this, go to the FIT. If you want to do this, go to Parsons. If you want to do this, go to Pratt. And then down at the bottom, because they probably didn't spend a lot of money with the magazine on advertising, right, was this little logo called Toby Coburn School for Fashion Careers. And underneath it says, do you want a career in fashion magazines? And I was like, that's it. I have to go there. That's my ticket. And so I look back at it a couple years later, and I was like, how did I do that? I guess I just put blinders on and headed to New York and got an internship at GQ. And that's kind of how it started.
Right. And I remember reading in your book, and I think it's important to emphasize this, because there's probably a lot of young people out there that are thinking, okay, if I'm currently at a position where it's not entirely the position I want to be in, what can I do to put myself in the right place? And in your book, you wrote about being in a position that you were filling envelopes, right? Or you were ideally, you weren't creative director, you weren't styling, but you would stay late at the office and help the creative director with the shoots after 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock.
Yes. Something that really pains me is when I talk to young people who are not following their dreams. They have a dream inside of them, but they're going somewhere else because, maybe their family told them to do that, or maybe it's more money or whatever. And I was never interested in that. I was never interested in my family getting involved in what my career should be. I was never worried that I wouldn't, make a living someday. I really wanted to do something I loved. And I think I got that from my dad a little bit. My dad was a happy guy, but I just got the feeling that his work was a little bit of drudgery. And, thinking about how much time you spend at your work, I wanted to love my job, and was also a creative guy, so I wanted to do something creative. So I just I took this internship. So basically, when I was at the school and I was about 6 months in, I see a little index card on the bulletin board. It says internship at GQ. I just rip it off there. I go to GQ. They hire me basically on the spot, and I work from 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock every day it was called the promotional department then, basically the business side of the magazine, right, stuffing envelopes. And then really over the course of the first couple of weeks, I started to ingratiate myself with the fashion editors. And at that point, it was kind of this era in GQ where it was spin the globe. Like, where should we go now? It's like, well, let's do a khaki story. Okay, let's go to Africa, or like, let's do a color story. Let's go to India. It was kind of like, let's match the clothes to some faraway place that would be the perfect location. So they were always packing these giant trunks, and everything had to be, labeled and numbered. So I just would stay till, 9 o'clock, midnight, whatever, every night, help them with that. And then I feel like over time, I just became indispensable. I just became part of the fashion department. And whatever they needed, I was there for, whether it be organizing the sock drawer or whatever. And I did it all for free. And so when Condé Nast purchased GQ, which was right around that time, it was owned by Esquire before, then I was able to pivot into a full-time job not far after that. There was about a 6-month lag where Condé Nast wanted to kind of leave everyone in place and check it out. What did we buy for like, very little money, because it had been for GQ had been for sale for a while, and for some reason people didn't really want it. I don't know why, but Condé Nast picked it up for $1, and they
What changes did they implement to? I mean, were you part of that movement to really bring Condé Nast into what it is now with GQ?
No, I was just there when it happened. So I started my internship in March, and on, let's call it April 1st, sometime in April, Condé Nast bought. So I was actually working for Esquire, because Esquire owned GQ, even though Esquire had already sold Esquire. So Esquire Inc., which was really trying to pivot away from periodicals and pivot into textbooks and law book publishing and all of that. They wanted to unload GQ. They didn't want to be in the magazine business anymore. So Condé Nast came in, bought GQ for not a lot of money, and I was there when it happened. So I became part of the hiring freeze. Like, we love you. We'd love you to pack trunks all summer. So I'm graduating at this point. We'd love you to, so I guess it's the second year because it was a 2-year schooling. We want you to pack trunks for free forever, but we can't do that. And we also can't keep you on. But, they're going to watch it. They're going to move us to the Condé Nast building. They're going to watch us for 6 months, and then you'll get a call from us. So I took a job at Macy's, which I didn't really like. And, but it was a good job. I was a sales,
Which location
associate.
in the city?
What's that?
Which location in the city?
Yeah, the big one on 34th Street. And, I started to move over the 6 months. I started to move up very quickly. I started as a sales associate, and then I was a department manager. Then they wanted to put me in the buying program. And I was like, with all due respect, and, I do everything to the best of my ability, work overtime, whatever, but I'm not interested in retail. So I was nervous. I was nervous that maybe that GQ would forget about me. And, but they called me 6 months later, and they were like, the hiring freeze is over, and you're going to be our first,
Amazing
new kid. So
and
that was it. So January 80 was right after New Year's, I started on January 80, full time.
How would you say, how does one create indispensability, right? If that's a word, becoming indispensable. What are the actions that, for instance, you took to really make that point?
I mean, that's that really old-fashioned term that no one uses anymore, and probably no one knows. That probably wasn't even my generation; it was my mom's generation. But it's gumption. You know that word, gumption?
I'm not familiar.
You're not familiar. So gumption is that thing that it's basically drive. It's basically the thing that keeps you going. It's the thing that makes you want to be indispensable. So what I was doing at GQ, there's two ways to look at it. So there's one way to look at it like, oh, this is really like grunt work, manual labor, packing these things, being really meticulous, cleaning the closet, vacuuming the closet, straightening everyone's desk. But my interpretation of it, because I wanted this so badly as a career, was all these things that I'm doing are going to help the magazine look better. Right. So it's almost like, who's the person who lays out all of Martha Stewart's ingredients, so she can make the perfect souffle, right?
Right.
So without that person, she can't make the perfect souffle. So I always saw myself as that person. Now, if you asked me to work with a mechanic and clean engines, that wouldn't interest me. Right. So I was definitely in the lane I wanted to be in. I was pinching myself because I was at the center of the GQ fashion department, and I had kind of gotten what I set out to get, and a lot of it was luck, but a lot of it was perseverance. So there's no, you'll probably hear me say this 100 times over the next hour, but there's no shortcuts. And the hustle is real. Right.
This is true. A lot of the things that I tell when I mentor, I'll mentor young guys every couple of months. Is of course the important piece to life is following passion, right? But you have to keep that curiosity rolling, right? Because in my opinion, you could be passionate about something for 6 months to a year, and then that kind of becomes boring. So in the importance of curiosity and persistence and perspectives, what do you have to say about that?
So curiosity didn't didn't come to me automatically. What came to me was this Midwestern kind of like super organized people pleaser, but as far as curiosity, yes, curiosity for a specific lane, let's say, specific, obviously my repertoire has opened up quite a bit since those days, but in those days it was, how do I land the job? How do I impress the people? What are my skills? I have no skills. I lived in a suburbs of St. Paul, Minnesota, nothing to show them that there's no reason they should hire me over someone whose parents work in fashion, or, the intern of a designer or whatever. There's no reason they should hire me. So I have to, what can I do to impress them? Well, first of all, I found out that they're a very down to earth group of people, and it was easy for me to integrate myself into them, and stay quiet, nose to the grindstone, to the road, and also give them more than they expect. Always make sure you're going like, giving them the 120%, not just the 100%. And I think that's super important. I mentor a lot of young people now, and I work with a lot of companies that have young people. And I try to, not preach, but teach them how to develop these skills and to, feel good about what they're doing, and also to not be imposters, to be true to what they really want to do, and not just be dialing it in. And I think the pandemic has been really hard for that, because a lot of people are, a little bit lost because we don't have the camaraderie of an office situation. But if what you're doing is authentic to who you are, authenticity is a big part of it, then the curiosity will come, because I'm someone who asks a lot of questions, and probably in the very early stages of my career, a lot of people weren't that interested in answering my questions. So it was, it's like I was thrown into the fire. But then there were those people that did answer my questions, and those people turned into my mentors. So I love that part of my job. I love helping people find out what their vocational goals are. I think sometimes that's the hardest thing. The easiest thing is going after it. The hardest thing is like doing some soul searching and really figuring out, what is it that I want to do? Take everything out of the equation except your passion. And once you find your passion, even though you're like, wow, this is going to be a struggle, and I'm going to probably have to get a second job, or do it. That's when it's right.
Right.
Don't do anything for money. Don't do anything for money ever. Money's a byproduct. Right. When you become a pro, the money will come in. But that's an imposter.
Right. No, I agree with you on that. Fully sensed. Passion before paycheck is what I say.
Yeah.
Which is kind of, when I started my career, my background's in finance. So when I moved to New York, I was really pursuing the idea of working on Wall Street. So I worked with the brokerage there. We were selling high yield bonds. And then ultimately, I don't know what it was, maybe a year into it, it's like a switch. And I was like, I'm not necessarily passionate about this. So I began pursuing media, of course, and going that route. But what about perspective, Jim? When we think of, someone like yourself, you're interacting with people like Justin Bieber, Kanye West, big celebrities on whether it's weekly or monthly. How do you allow yourself to come back to build perspective on what exactly you're doing and the message you're trying to put out when you're so involved in being so busy with high-profile individuals?
Well, high-profile individuals are kind of just like you and I. They just, it depends on what level fanboy you are, right? So I'm not a fanboy. I don't get nervous in front of celebrities. I kind of see everybody as the same. And, I've photographed probably not a lot of people you could say their name that I haven't worked with at some point. Okay. Of course, you have your favorites, but the really blessed thing for me is that whether it's just a one-day shoot or whether it's an ongoing relationship as a friend or getting to dress them, is like there are very few bad apples, and I think it's like when people get to the top of their level, whether it be in sports or in Hollywood or in the music scene, it's like they're there for a reason, and so working with A-level talent is something that gets me really, really excited. And I'm very, I think you'll get this from a lot of people who are in similar position as mine, is that every shoot you do, every situation you get into, you get those butterflies because you want the pictures to be great. Not that I'm working with,
Right.
Maybe Obama was the one who made me the most kind of excited, nervous, but you're excited because you want the project to be really great. Because as a creative director, you can't not fulfill the vision you have for the project.
Right.
Because if you do, the whole thing will implode, because the project needs a leader. The project needs someone who is a visionary, and the project needs someone who doesn't really waver on their commitment to what the end result is. And that's not to say that you're not open for the surprise and the accident and all of that. That's all part of it too.
Right.
But I just went off on a huge tangent. Still no if I answered the question.
This is good. No, I mean, you dove right into what I wanted to go into. So I know when I speak to a lot of friends, they, for instance, they fanboy a lot. And what I always tell people is, maybe it's the New York, right? When you live in New York, there's a certain aspect of when for instance, you're at a bar or you're at a restaurant and you're just interacting with high profile individuals, and it feels like just any other setting. And I think you don't experience that in Texas a lot. So I have a lot of friends in Texas that don't understand, that we're just all human beings. We're the same human beings. You could have the same interactions as you would with anyone else. But yeah, I feel that's important. It's important to point out.
Yeah, and I think people are people, and people actually want to talk about other things.
Right.
People. If you're a high-level celebrity, you don't really want to talk about. If you're Justin Bieber, you don't necessarily want to talk about your tour. If you're an athlete, you not necessarily need to talk about yesterday's game. Yeah. But the thing that always was the bond that brought us all together is, but they did really enjoy being in GQ or being on the cover of GQ. It was a trophy for them, right? So they were excited about the process of looking at the clothes and getting GQ.
Who wouldn't?
Right?
I mean, getting tailored, fitted.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's the magic moment. And I can't talk to athletes about a 7-point lead from last night's game, if that's even a term. but I can. Whether it be LeBron or Russell Westbrook or anyone, it's when they come into the GQ fashion closet, or they come into the studio, or I come to them with, several racks of clothes. They're like, show me what you want to do. And I want to try this all on. And they're really pumped about the experience. Right. So that's what's fun about it. And then when you work with actors, it's a completely different situation, because actors are actors for a certain reason. They don't have to play themselves, right? So you want to give them a character to play. So that's very different. Athletes are like, give me the latest Gucci and show me how you want me to wear it, and put me in front of white seamless, and I'm gonna kill it, right? But an actor needs a little bit more. He needs the photographer and the creative director to be his or her directors. And the more you create a storyline for them, the better you're going to use your time with them.
Would you say that there's a little more humor in working with actors, or is it more serious when you're working with actors opposed to an athlete?
It can be both, but I think athletes definitely come in with a lot of gusto. They come in and they can't wait to get to the close. They can't wait to hear what you're going to do with them. They're up for anything. And then actors can be the same. Actors can be a little bit introspective sometimes. I remember when I was shooting Ryan Gosling for the cover, and Mario Testino was shooting, and he was very solemn, which I wasn't used to, but probably the third or fourth time I'd worked with him. And we were doing really good pictures, and the concept I came up with, which was kind of based on an old film noir, film stills, and a little bit of Herb Ritts from the 80s. And, I had my mood board. But I had to go in the dressing room, and I was like, Ryan, it's like, seems like you're a little bit of funk, and, we're doing the cover next, so I just need you to bring your A game. And of course he's going to bring his A game, and he did. But before that, he said, well, I'm trying to stay in character, because I'm filming. I'm doing this week. I'm doing night scenes for this movie called Drive,
right?
And I didn't know what Drive was, And then of course, 9 months later, when I saw Drive, it's like, okay, that's why.
Now I understand.
That's why. I understand why, and I didn't, and I respect that, and that is sometimes you need to know that ahead of time so you can play that into the scenario. Right. Knowing that we're not going to get on a trampoline and get big smiles here, but that's cool too. Like, let's do a badass shoot with Ryan Gosling.
Right. That was a good movie, by the way.
Really good.
I want to go back to mentorship. You did touch on mentorship. Right now, you're specifically leading a project with Rachel.
Yes, Rachel. So I shortly after, it kind of goes back. It kind of goes back to, let's say, September 2017. We all decide in a cover meeting that we really want to put Colin Kaepernick on the cover. And obviously knowing that this could be a very polarizing cover and a very exciting cover and a very, we are also on board for it, and we can't wait to do it. But there are kind of some restrictions to it, meaning we want the big reveal to be when it lands on the newsstand. He was one of our Men of the Year covers that year. So we wanted to pick the right photographer. And we also wanted to go to a secret location. So we went up in really far up in Harlem, and to a really quiet location. We had to chase away a couple of TMZ people, but for the most part, before the shoot started, I called Rachel, because Rachel is a dear friend of mine. Rachel is a amazing stylist. We first met on a LeBron shoot, 15 years ago. She was his stylist, and I always like to get the stylist involved in a minimal way. I want it to be, I definitely want to reach out to them and find out the vibe of the person at that time. Maybe it's like, well, what's their size now, if they're fluctuating size, or what are they feeling clothes wise? Just at the very early stages, I'm always kind of locking into an idea that I get immediately, but I always want to call the stylist.
Right.
I very rarely invite the stylist on set because I want it to be a pure GQ thing. But Rachel and I established very early on a friendship. And so years later, when we were doing Colin Kaepernick, I also asked her to join us because she styles Colin Kaepernick. Nice. And Colin came to us and said, Rachel and Jim, is it possible for me to wear only POC designers? And I said, I think that's a brilliant idea. We have 4 days. You are not a sample size, right, and we got to get going, right? And I had my roster, which was this, and then Rachel had her roster, which was this. So it was like kind of eye-opening to me that, I didn't have the big roster of POC designers. Right. She had the bigger roster, and it became a true collaboration. And I met a lot of talented people through it, and a lot of those people are, big designers now. But what we were able to do, totally Colin's idea, my idea to make the clothes all black, my idea to make it a little bit 70s feeling. But when we went up into the location uptown, we did these amazing pictures, and it was a very emotional day. And I got to spend time with Colin. I'd photographed him before for the cover when he was a full-time quarterback. What's that?
In studio, whenever you guys did the Man of the Year, or?
Well, I photographed him for a September cover years ago, and we shot him up in San Francisco. So when he was with the 49ers, is that right?
I think so.
Okay. So he was the quarterback of the 49ers. We did it. So I knew him, and I remember thinking, it's so quiet. and focused and polite person. So when we were reunited for this, we did the inside pictures outside, and yes, we did kind of a makeshift studio for the Men of the Year. That year, they were all shot in a studio on white. We had I think we had 3 different covers. So fast forward to this past June, and Black Lives Matters, and I started calling my Black friends, and I was like, need to have some uncomfortable conversations with you, or just conversations with you to know like how you move through the world, or what you feel is missing. And a lot of times people would say we're not giving the same opportunities, and it doesn't, they're no less talented, they're just not given the opportunities, they're not mentored in the same way. So a light bulb went off, because I wanted to do something, and I wanted to do something that felt authentic to who I am. And I'm very much into mentoring, and I wanted to do it with someone, and the light bulb went off. I was like, okay. Colin originally introduced me to Black Lives Matter in 2017. Rachel was there. Rachel and I could do this together with the impetus that it started with Colin. So I called her. She's like, I'm on board. And we just put it out there in Instagram, and we started getting these DMs. And we wanted people to know that we were vetting them, that they couldn't just, I don't want anyone, I'm not going to mentor anyone who's just playing in a sandbox and making it a hobby.
Right.
You really have to show me that you're in it for real. But we got so many requests, and basically what we had put out there is, if you're a Black menswear professional in creative direction, fashion design, photography, styling, we can help you out. So we have I think almost 20 people now, and we're mentoring these people. We put aside most Mondays to chat with them on Zoom, and then we really try to hook them into special projects and get them to dream a little bit bigger. And it's just been really fulfilling for me. The door has been swinging both ways. And, I have a lot of knowledge just over the years I've been in the business, and I want to give back. So it's been really
a phenomenal way to do it.
So it's a long answer, but I'm really passionate about the project. So
love it. These designers are all.
I really invite anyone who wants to DM me and be part of this.
That's magnificent. Thank you, Jim. These designers, they're throughout the United States, correct? They don't have to.
They're throughout the
New York.
United States. They're male, female. They are just starting. They're established and struggling. They can be 19. They can be 50. And it's been super rewarding. And especially in the design world, you start off as a designer, that is a very lonely place. It's like me, myself, and I, right?
Right.
And you're designing these things, and you're jazzed about it. You don't really have the money to kind of show your clothes. You don't really have the PR list to know who to show your clothes to. And you could be sitting here, in your studio or your living room, knowing that your clothes, you could be the next Virgil, but you don't have anyone that's going to help you, right? So we try to really connect people, and create this kind of spider web of network. But I have to say that the people that are reaching out to us are really genuine about wanting to be successful and paying their dues and working hard. And sometimes I'm surprised at how simple their questions are, and sometimes I'm blown away by how much they already know and they're teaching me. So it's a real back and forth. It's super cool.
Of course. I want to go back to the touch of fashion, right? I mean, I didn't want to touch too much on fashion during this podcast, but developing one's own sense of style. I had a stylist friend here in town last week. She had posted this thing, what lacks in men's fashion today. And I told her, I feel like there's a lack of individual style. I feel like if I go to an event, whether it's a business casual event, right, it's not a black tie event, because at a black tie event, everyone's dressed the same. But in a business casual event, at least here in Texas, everyone's in khakis and a button up and then a navy blazer. How does one develop their own sense of style, or what do you say to that, Jim?
Well, I can hear what you're saying, and it's very true. Great personal style is hard to develop if you don't kind of have it in your soul. But if you have the want and the need to have better style than the guy standing next to you, I always tell people to find someone who you really respect and copy their style until it becomes yours. So if you like the way Brad Pitt wears his t-shirts, or you like the way,
David Gandy.
What's that?
David Gandy.
David Gandy, or you like the way LeBron's wearing his fedora, whatever it is, then maybe you should start grabbing those elements and then try to make them your own. I mean, we're all kind of product of people who touch us in some way growing up, and even in regular life. I mean, I learned the power of wearing a uniform, right? So I always wear black clothes, and people are like, oh, in black clothes, you probably never wear green. I was like, it's not that I didn't have those years that I experimented with a lot of fashion, but it's like at one point, I just wanted to put the lab coat on. I just wanted to wear something that made me, because being a creative director or a stylist or a fashion editor, it's a very different job than someone just looking really good. So a guy who's like, thinking in your mind of like, who's the most dandy looking guy who's maybe not in the fashion business, and you look at that guy, and a lot of people assume like that person would make a good stylist. It's like, no, that person is loving his mirror, and he is nailing the clothes on himself. My job is actually to make you look your best. I'm an image maker, right?
It's a little more
so it's
complicated.
not about me. It's not about me. So it's like I want my clothes to be simple and comfortable, and I love fashion, and I love, the wilder the better, but I want to be able to put that on someone else and make them look good. But I know what you're saying about going to those events where everybody's dressed the same, and men in general have that conundrum. They want to fit in and stand out at the same time. And how do they do that? And that, hopefully they learn some of that from GQ. That's, pretty much my message going forward. I want to make sure that I'm always talking to the real guy, because that's my hero. That's the guy. That's the guy that I look out for. And that's the guy that really, that was the main reason why I did the book, because I wanted to go on a book tour and talk to guys in America and in Europe too. But, we did over 20 cities, and it was really eye-opening. I mean, obviously people dressed to come to the event,
right?
But I spent time with as many people as I could, and learned a lot about the idea that I think it's a little bit of a myth, and it's a little bit of a spoiled myth that when you live in New York or LA, those are the only stylish people. But when you go to Grand Rapids, Michigan, or when you go to, Miami, or you go to, what are some of the small places Dallas, Texas, or you go to Atlanta, Georgia, or whatever, you see that people really enjoy dressing up, and they don't want to live in New York or LA. They're fine. They're love their city, right? But they want to have a little bit of a fashion flair. Chicago, for example, it's a fashion-y city, but it's not New York. It's a different kind of sophisticated culture, right?
Right.
And this was really eye-opening for me. And I thought to myself, I was kicking myself. I was like, why didn't I do this 20 years ago? Why didn't I just go on a tour and like talk to guys, right? And I learned so much on my book tour about guys' needs and how they shop, and how they want to stand out a little bit, and how they're really proud to live in their town and be amongst, the most stylish.
Right.
So I always say, I think the hardest journey for a man is from the shower to the closet, because he's going to look at that same blue suit and be like, oh boy, I'm going to become invisible today, just like everybody else. But that's going to kind of be okay, right? Well, actually it's not. Even if you change your color, your pocket square, or decide to wear a polo shirt under a suit, or decide not to wear the suit at all and try something different. That's the first step in stepping out.
Right. That book tour got diverted by COVID.
Yeah, we did 26 cities. So the only thing I missed out was Houston, Miami. I didn't do Miami, actually.
Oh,
wow. New Orleans. We were going to go back to Dallas. We were going to go back to DC. I was going to do something at the Smithsonian. We're going to go back to LA for a few more.
Austin was
London,
as well.
London.
London as well?
And all of Asia. Those are the ones that got diverted. I was lucky that the book came out in September, so most of the tour was done before COVID. But it was, it was sad not to do the rest of them. But we may start up again.
Yeah,
I mean, Vancouver and Montreal, they really want me to come as soon as we can. So
you have plans to pick up kind of maybe not necessarily where you exactly left off, but of course on that trail.
Yeah, what I wanted to do and what I'm in the process now is creating a different. I don't know if you ever saw the sizzle that I showed before one of my events, but I re-edited the sizzle and made it a little bit different. So if I did go back to a city that had some of the same folks, that they would see something different. And I think people like it. It's very important for me to combine not only like images that give you goosebumps, because that's really important, but also humor. Humor is really important to me.
Right. That's the story I think that that people have to tell, right? There's always a humor side to things. It's not just about looking at pictures. It's not just about watching a video, right? There's something that's to be said behind the scenes.
Exactly.
That leads me to my last narrative that I wanted to kind of talk to you about, Jim. When you're building and you're cultivating a team and building this lasting legacy that you have had, right, 4 decades with GQ, you have far outreached beyond GQ. You have worked with, just very, very moving people. What's behind building and cultivating that team that helps you deliver that narrative, those messages that you want to deliver, that humor?
I mean, the first thing you have to realize, and you realize this as a young upstart, is that nothing is going to happen by yourself. And you have to hire the best team, and you have to inspire the team, and you have to make sure to include them and make sure to hear them and listen to their voices. And yes, be the final yes, no on things, but to really, my team at GQ was the best in the business. And I like to bring people in that I know are going to stay with me for a while, because I'm going to train them really well. And the training takes a while. Right. It's like, you're not going to get going till about the 18-month period, right? Because you're just going to be in fashion boot camp for a while. But once that clicks in, I had probably 4 or 5 people, 27 years, 30 years, 22 years, 12 years, 7 years, people stayed a long time. And a lot of that is a testament to the magazine business and to GQ being something that is constantly changing and constantly different. And I think what a lot of people don't realize about magazines, or maybe they do, but they don't realize how much work goes into it, is that every 3.5 weeks you have to produce a different magazine. So that is a lot, right. Because as soon as it's over, you just got a bunch of white pages and you have to start over again, right? And not that you're not working on several issues at the same time, but you better have a pretty good crackerjack crew that will know how to pull a rabbit out of a hat, or shoot Brad Pitt tomorrow if that's the only day he has, and get all the clothes in 24 hours.
You almost have to be on the same wavelength.
I had that crew. What's that?
You almost have to be on the same wavelength at all points of time.
Yeah, and you have to be. I grew up, from age of 19 on, I grew up in the culture of magazines. So for me, it never became, I was always someone who never said no. So I don't love the word no. So sometimes that makes me, could make me a little bit difficult to work for, because it's like, okay, now why is that no? And why can't we? Isn't like that store still open? Or isn't there another one that's still open because it's 10 o'clock at night and we have a run through and, we can't find the right color socks or whatever. But I feel like you have to be, in the magazine business, you have to embrace the circus and you have to be a bit of a deadline junkie. And I've never known anything else. So I'm always like working on 5 things in one, pivoting to something else, something crashes and burns and you got to like start over or whatever. So you would hope that the people that you take on with you, which are really the people whose shoulders that you stand on, are really up for it also.
Right.
And it's fun. It's fun when you find those people who are really there for it. I think a lot of people want to say they worked at GQ, but they're not willing to put the work in or realize I've had a lot of talented people that haven't stayed just because the schedule doesn't fit their personality.
Right.
So once you find people and they really love the idea of this really fast-paced thing, that you can do a shoot on a Tuesday, the film comes in on Wednesday, you lay out it on a Thursday, and it goes to press on a Friday. It's like that can send shivers down a lot of people's spines. But once you find someone who really loves the idea of it, you can cultivate them. That's a great team, and I had a great team.
Right. Yeah, there's beauty in having seeing that finished product.
Yeah.
And knowing all the work that went into it. The endless nights.
Exactly.
The arguments.
Yes.
Well, Jim, I know you got a very busy schedule, and I want to thank you for taking, this hour out of your day to come in, talk to us, give us some insight. I know there's a lot of young people listening that are going to greatly benefit from hearing your voice.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me, and I appreciate it. And you're a fashionable guy, and I like that. I like what you said earlier. I like that you said that you realized you were kind of in a lane that wasn't your passion.
Yeah.
And you did something about it. So it doesn't matter if you don't necessarily have to come running out of school knowing what you want, but once it clicks, once you figure out what that is, you need to go for it. So you're a prime example of that. And I really appreciate you having me on board today.
Well, I appreciate that, Jim. I look forward to connecting when we're back in Brooklyn, hopefully in the next 2 months, and catching up then.
Okay, can't wait.
All righty, Jim.
Thanks
Take care.
again. All right, take care.
Bye now.
Bye-bye. Bye.
All right, guys, that was episode 17 of the Gurupresario Podcast. If you're tuning in on Spotify or iTunes, make sure you go back to YouTube. There's actually a video portion that follows this podcast with Jim Moore. Vice versa, if you're on YouTube and you're watching the video platform and you have to leave the house or you just have to hop on an app, go ahead and hop on Spotify or iTunes or any of the other podcast platforms that are out there and type in Gurupresario Podcast, and you're going to find us there. And make sure you subscribe and you follow us there. Other than that, I want to thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.